I'm joined now by the co-host of Pod Save America, Jon Lovett. Jon, thanks for joining.
Brian, good to see you. Look at us face to face.
That's
We
it.
redid our studio a little bit.
Yeah, I like it.
And by the way, loving the comments, everybody. But this now we're on your show.
We're on my show, but I'm sure they're going to send some comments
send
about
comments.
how they love it too.
Tell us we look great. Hi.
Hi. Okay, so we are now in a moment where we're watching these Teslas be set on fire across the country. Elon has been using this as an opportunity to present himself as the victim. What do you make of the fact that even as this guy is responsible for overseeing cuts to lifelines that the American people need, responsible for cutting USAID and food programs that impoverished people need, and HIV prevention programs, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which only exists to help people that are the victims of predatory financial institutions, that he is going on national television and yet again presenting himself as the victim in all of this?
Look, there's nothing more dangerous than a bully that thinks he's a victim. Donald Trump is a bully pretending to be a victim. The modern Republican Party is a bunch of bullies pretending to be victims. That's the core of their appeal. And I think what's dangerous about Elon is currently doing is he's going on television and saying Democrats are committing these acts.
It was reported that it was one person in Las Vegas.
The reason political violence is dangerous, the reason it is dangerous when protests turn violent, even if the vast majority of protesters are peaceful, is because it puts in the hands of a few random actors the direction of the news, the direction of our politics. We don't believe in ceding control of our politics to random people deciding that they get to tell us what happens in our country. That is wrong when Elon does it at Doge. That is wrong when somebody takes a shot at Donald Trump during the campaign. That is wrong when people try to take a protest. In these cases, these are just acts of vandalism happening all over the country. But in other cases, when you have protests where a few actors decide to take it upon themselves to make those protests destructive and then cast an entire protest in that light, I don't agree with that. I don't think that's a good thing to do. But this is why democracy is important. This is why it is important that we have a constitution in which Congress, based on the votes of the people that sent them there, decide how the money is directed, and then the president executes that money. Yes, through his appointees, through his administration, but also through the oversight of Congress and with the approval of judges, making sure the law is being followed. The danger of what we are seeing is if in one arena a group of people decides the law doesn't apply to them, it makes a lot of people feel powerless. It makes a lot of people feel as though the rules don't matter anymore. It makes a lot of people feel as though we don't live in a country of laws, that people won't be held accountable, that democratic accountability will elude us. And that is not just a recipe for right-wing governments to dismantle social programs and make life worse. It is a recipe for chaos in the country at large. We all collectively benefit from a system in which people trust that leaders will be held accountable to the voters and to the constitutional order that has made us the envy of the world.
You know, there's been a lot of debate lately about whether or not we're in a constitutional crisis. And a lot of legal experts are pointing to the fact that, okay, we're not technically in a constitutional crisis until there has been a court order that wasn't followed. It was appealed up to an appeals court. It was appealed up to the Supreme Court. And then if the Supreme Court issues a ruling that runs counter to what the administration wants to do, and yet the administration barrels ahead anyway, that's technically a constitutional crisis. And then you have, a broad swath of the rest of the base, of which I would probably include myself, where what we're seeing right now is so obviously counter to everything the Constitution says and so clearly a crisis. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on this as this, parsing of words and definitions kind of plays itself out.
I think it's so fucking stupid.
As you recoil.
I felt this long before. I feel like the question, are we in a constitutional crisis, is the wrong question to be asking. First of all, I think it's a distinction without a difference.
Right.
Like, we're in a big crisis.
Yeah.
I think you can just take the word constitutional and make it mean big.
Yeah.
Are we in a big crisis? Absolutely. There's no moment at which first of all, Donald Trump and the people around him are smart enough to know that you don't just on a random day decide to stop following brazenly a constitutionally valid order from a judge, you slowly erode those protections. Already, we have Donald Trump deporting people to El Salvador without so much as a hearing. A judge says, hold on a second. The Trump administration says, too late, the plane was already over international waters. The president of El Salvador says, oopsie. The Secretary of State doesn't defend an American judge, doesn't offend the American system, but just simply reposts it. He's on the side of El Salvador's president. You have other examples of the administration claiming, oh, we just did it, you said it in court, but we didn't see it in writing, or it happened too late. They're in some cases saying that they don't have to follow rulings. In other cases saying they are following them, but it was just too late. In others saying that the judges have no right to rule on these issues. There's not going to be a bright line that we cross and we say, now we're in the constitutional crisis. We are slowly getting into a deeper and deeper crisis in which the president of the United States, who is at root instinctively an authoritarian, is slowly and deliberately eroding the guardrails that protect us from those abuses. Does that mean we're in a constitutional crisis or just a big fucking crisis? I don't know. I don't care.
And I think that's such a good point that I think everybody's waiting for the day that like we switch from a democracy into an autocracy. But like it is inherently the fact that they are normalizing a lot of what we're seeing right now, that the Overton window is shifting day by day, that expressly gets us to the point where we won't even notice that switch as it's happening. Like we've seen it even with Elon has been peppering this idea of impeaching judges whose rulings don't comport with his political ideology. And so rather than just, abide by the law, rather than just follow the regular judicial process, maybe appeal a ruling that you don't like, he's like, get rid of the judges. Just go right to the root and just eliminate people who exist in positions of power that don't redound to my political, financial, or personal benefit.
Here's another part of this. We're already so far down this road. What is the rationale that Chuck Schumer gives for why he decided to vote in favor of a continuing resolution to keep the government open when Democrats had the ability to say no and prevent a bill from being passed without concessions or causing a government shutdown? One of the arguments was, I am worried about what happens if we go into a shutdown because it won't have an end. There's no off-ramp, and Elon and Trump can continue their rampage across the federal government, this extra-legal, unconstitutional defiance of Congress, ignoring of the law.
As if it's not happening right now.
First of all, as if it's not happening right now, but second of all, hold on a second. What you're saying is, and this is the danger of a backslide into authoritarianism, this is the danger of what fascism represents. What fascism loves is if there are places where institutional rules and procedures are a counter to their plans, they ignore them. They defy them. If there are places where the institutions can help them, they'll use them, right? Donald Trump loves, right, to have a big inaugural where he is held up, where he can march. He loves being on Air Force One. He loves the powers of the presidency, the lawful, real, constitutional powers of the presidency. But if what we're saying already is that Donald Trump's breaking of the law over here creates leverage over here when he's following the law, we are already conceding to the rise of authoritarianism. We are already saying that Donald Trump's lawlessness is working. That to me is the biggest problem, right? And like regardless of the debate, and I think it's a hard debate, but regardless of that, we are already conceding that Donald Trump is taking us into authoritarianism, because just by admitting that Donald Trump's Doge lawlessness is leverage, we are conceding that the authoritarian takeover is basically kind of unfolding in front of us.
Right, that it's legitimate.
It's happening.
A lot of what we're seeing is that as he continues to do this, it's making him and Republicans obviously less popular, and we're seeing that play out at town halls across the country. Mm-hmm. We're seeing it play out in poll numbers for Trump and the Republican Party. But at the same time, there aren't Democrats stepping in to fill that void. I think Democrats largely view this as, okay, things are moving in the right direction. But when Democrats are simultaneously not doing anything to help their own poll numbers, then we don't take advantage of the rare opportunity that we have here to kind of exploit his weakness, because we're getting as unpopular, we're continuing to decline even as Republicans are continuing to decline. And so how do you think of this in terms of this moment right now where we should be taking advantage of the precipitous decline in the popularity of this Trump Republican Party, and instead we're again, like, I think the latest CNN poll showed Democrats as the least popular they've been since the polling began.
Right. And so what's driving that, right? Part of it is going to be the kind of toxic brand that Democrats have, that is a little bit the aftermath of the election, in which voters basically, and this is something that's true around the world, were fed up with rising costs, I think we are all still collectively dealing with the trauma of the pandemic and the changes that it accelerated, and incumbents paid a price for that. Democrats were the incumbents. We were paying a price for that. I also think we have a massive credibility issue with voters. That is because we got behind a president who was too old because we didn't have an alternative. And then when we did have an alternative, there wasn't enough time to define a new path. So what does that tell us? I think, one, people want to see us fight. I think that's why one reason the numbers are so low is that Democrats are angry. That's the other reason they're so low. So we need to fight. We need to push back against this deeply unpopular agenda. People did not sign up. They signed up for lower. People signed on to attack the rising cost of living. They did not sign on for dismantling cancer research, Medicaid, the Parks Department, the call centers for people to get help with their Social Security. We need to fight that everywhere. Elon Musk is not a popular figure. Unleashing a billionaire to slash social services and government services is not a popular position. That is still reality. And by the way, just fighting those things might be enough to bring out the people we need in 2026 to take back the House, prevent Donald Trump from passing any more of his agenda through Congress, if he still gives a fuck about Congress then. But it still leaves the problem that in the coming years, we need to figure out how to appeal to more people, both to win the presidency and to win Senate seats outside of the progressive and liberal places and moderate places. We already are barely hanging on to 47 seats.
Right.
Like, Democrats in the future, especially because as states like California lose population to states like Texas and Florida, we won't even be able to win the presidency with the states that gave Joe Biden the White House. So, like, Donald Trump goes to New York and says, we're going to win New York. Obviously, that's bullshit. But then you see a big shift in New York towards Donald Trump. If Donald Trump, this craven, ignorant, gut instinct politician, has the wherewithal to imagine a future in which he can win 40 states, why can't we?
Yeah.
Right? If we're losing to the dumbest motherfuckers on earth, what does that make us?
Well, I think one point that was especially potent that you made was that we need people to fight. And I think it's been our misguided view or intra-party battle for so long that, like, which is the right ideology? Is it going to be, do you want to have candidates who are more progressive? Do you want to have candidates who are more moderate? My view on this, I've tried to take a nuanced view on this, is like you need both, right? This isn't like rocket science here. You need people like Jared Golden who are going to win in Maine, and you're just not going to get Bernie Sanders to win in Jared Golden's district, right? But at the same time, I don't necessarily feel like that's on point right now, because it's what I've seen more and more of is that people just want, regardless of their political ideology, where they land on the spectrum, people just want Democrats who are willing to go in there and fight. And it's been so long. I mean, even since I've been involved in digital media for politics, I've watched as Mitch McConnell, who I believe will spend the rest of eternity in the depths of hell alongside the worst people of humanity for all that he has wrought onto this country and the ways that he has dismantled and fundamentally damaged our democracy. You won't find a single Democrat who's going to say, well, we don't see how effective he's been, and the fact that he can go in there and he knows how to win, and Democrats just aren't willing to do that. And the example that I like to use is the parliamentarian. And Democrats will get like a bad ruling from the parliamentarian, and they'll say, well, the parliamentarian says we can't do that, and so what could we possibly do? And the Republicans are like, The parliamentarian says we can't do that, so let's get a new fucking parliamentarian. And they've literally just replaced the parliamentarian. And that's a microcosm for the broader fight. And I think that we're just at a point, regardless of political ideology, regardless of whether you are a Jared Golden Democrat or an Ilhan Omar Democrat or anywhere in between, that what we are missing in this party is just some sense of fight, of conviction, of actually going to the wall and making sure that what you are in office to do, you're able to accomplish.
Yeah. I think that was good.
What do you think?
I think that was good.
I mean, I'm just curious where you stand on this, because it for so long has been an issue of, well, we're not progressive enough or we're not moderate enough, and we have to, lefties say that we have to go more to the center and vice versa, and I just don't think that that's where we are right now.
Yes. So I think that there is probably, just to take what you said, let's just try this. There are sort of three axes, right? There is left, right. And I think that one is the one where we spend most of our time debating.
Yeah.
But why? Well, partly because it has been in recent years the left of the party that's been the most aggressive, the most combative, the most adept at social media, and that has, I think, had the most backing from kind of more engaged online, younger progressives. Though we now have data from this election that shows the millennials continue to be America's progressive generation.
That's right. We're the only one that hasn't gotten more conservative.
That George W. Bush was a vaccine against right-wing politics, and Barack Obama was the booster shot. But
to put it in a way that will push off every Republican watching.
For sure. But if you look at Democratic politics over a longer, let's say the last 30 or 40 years, who are some of the most successful Democratic politicians? They have been Bernie Sanders, they've been Barack Obama, they've been Bill Clinton. And what did they offer? They offered an attack on the status quo and on the establishment. From Bernie Sanders, it's for the left. For Bernie Sanders, it's from the left. For Barack Obama, it's against DC. From Bill Clinton, it was from the center, right? Each of them ran against an establishment, and that's what people were really looking for. So what does that tell you? So what are the other two axes? It's fight, which is what you're talking about, but it's also reform. And look, in 2006, George W. Bush wins handily in 2004, despite the ongoing chaos in Iraq. Again, it was supposed to be this big realignment. Democrats figured out over the next few years how to fight back and win the House. And I was there. It was huge. It was exactly what we needed to put us in a position to believe we could really win in 2008. How did we do that? Well, one, it was just running against the chaos and extremism of the Bush agenda. They had the ongoing fiasco in Iraq. They had an effort to privatize Social Security. They had a failed effort to pass immigration reform, which today would be the liberal bill, to be honest. And they had Katrina, and they had a bunch of corruption in Congress. People like Jack Abramoff. There was this scandal involving a guy named Mark Foley. So for most of that campaign, for most of that season, you were really just running against Republicans. But in the closing months, there was this agenda. It was this reform agenda. It was anti-corruption. It was campaign finance reform. It was pro-union. It was raising the minimum wage. It was pocketbook issues, like simple policies that the whole caucus could get behind. Yes, there were some people that were more progressive, and yes, there were some people that were more centrist. By the way, this was back in the day when there was a Democratic senator from Nebraska and there was a Democratic senator from Montana that were much more conservative. That became actually the limiting factor in Barack Obama's agenda a few years later. But we were able to build this big coalition with a clear critique of the Republicans plus a simple unifying agenda everybody could get behind. And I think right now, my question is that the right, in this environment, is it the right thing to do now to wait as we would normally do, right? You would say you don't want to put out an agenda now. You want it to be there in the fall of next year, which feels like, fuck, I can't believe it's only been 2 months. Or do we need to start now putting together a vision for what we're going to do by listening to what we're hearing from people, which is they just don't know what Democrats stand for. Did we pay such a price for having Joe Biden being completely unable to communicate what Democrats stand for basically the second half of his administration, and for Kamala Harris, I think, being hamstrung by having to defend the administration and being hamstrung by some of the positions she took in 2020, leading people to have no fucking idea what she stood for? Have we paid such a heavy price for the politics of 2024 that we have to now get ahead of that with a clear agenda? I don't know the answer. I think Bernie Sanders right now, I think, is incredibly effective in this Fight Oligarchy tour, which is mostly geared around the enemies of our democracy, but does have his progressive politics at its center. You have people like Chris Murphy and Brian Schatz and others that are out there trying to do this in their ways that I think is helpful. I agree with you that we kind of need them all.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer.
Let's finally finish off with this. I don't know if you've seen the latest Fox News appearance from Mike Johnson. I'm going to put it right up here on the screen. I would like your initial reaction to maybe some bronzer being used by Mike Johnson and other members of the Republican Party.
I have many substantive critiques of Mike Johnson and the Republican Party, but I think it's important that we, as progressives, always remember that we are not just fighting for the liberation of queer people and marginalized people, but we are fighting for Mike Johnson's liberation too. And if what he feels he needs is a kind of gender-affirming care, kind of to help express his masculine identity, if what he is trying to do to be his best self is make these kinds of changes, I support him. And I want him to know that even though he lives in a political world of rigid division and expectations that lead him to have to make these kinds of changes, we support him however he wants to look. But just know that in a future where everyone can be themselves and we celebrate difference and nuance in how people express their gender, maybe he wouldn't feel so much pressure to look a certain way.
The way I think about it is, when dogs and their owners start to look the same. Yeah. Well,
that's a really good point. Well, there is a certain kind of right-wing aesthetic taking hold. It is extreme. It is conformist. It is hyper-real. And people get the faces they deserve.
That's right. Love it. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Good to see you.